So thank you so much for the presentation. Thank you, Stephanie, Carrie, Kylene, Dorothy, and I'm missing somebody. As you have noticed, I'm sure that I did introduce that there would be 2 presentations, but we've just got the 1 presentation today. So I'm going to let you guys chat for a bit while I try to reconnect so I can see if we have any questions. Pardon me, sorry about that. So maybe the team can just maybe introduce yourself. Stephanie, I don't think I did a proper introduction, so perhaps you could introduce yourself.
Absolutely, thank you. So my name is Stephanie Lang. I am the Director of Operations for the Kelowna Homelessness Research Collaborative. I am a social worker in BC and currently a PhD student, and very, very pleased to be joined today by my co-researchers, Carrie Rudbull, Dorothy Goodeye, and Sherry Landry. We're excited to chat with folks and questions that they may have about our work and our presentation.
That's terrific. So, sorry, still not in the platform yet. So I was thinking that some people may have missed a little bit of the presentation. So I thought that maybe you could start off by just going over you talked a lot about allyship and how you endeavor to make that meaningful. If you could maybe just sum up some of the ideas that, and I'm sorry to throw it to you like that, but I think that was a really interesting part of the video that some folks may have missed. So.
Well, anyone on the team really can sort of take this from here. If you see a little person moving in the corner, it's Bring Your Child to Work Day at my office. So I do have someone with me, just not to be alarmed that I have someone in my office with me. When we started the work on allyship, just to sort of start some context, we didn't know that's what we were embarking on. What we thought we were embarking on is a co-research project with the team members that you see here, plus Kylie Myra, who's not able to be with us today. And really what we discovered is that when we took community engaged kinds of approaches to our research, which I'm sure many people here are familiar with, but we took it a step further and we really prioritized the inclusion, the voice, the co-creation of people with lived experience, that we had an incredibly rich and a very different experience to the project that we were working on. And so we realized quite quickly that what we were experiencing was like nothing that we had ever had ever done or had ever sort of participated in as a research project before. So the approaches that we were using, how we were inviting people into the work, how the responses that we were getting from the work, how we were analyzing the work was completely transformed. And so, sort of looking around at literature and borrowing from other areas, we came up with the term allyship and research, where we're really looking at the prioritization, the privileging, and the inclusion of other voices, in particular, most specifically lived experience voices in the work that we're doing. And we really believe that that's an approach that doesn't just translate only to research, but we saw the application, the potential for the more meaningful inclusion as a co-creator for lots of different contexts. So program development, program evaluation, creation of policy. We see that there's lots of opportunity for us to take these concepts and apply them in other places.
Thanks so much, Carrie. And in fact, we just had a question come in where somebody one of our audience members had asked if you could expand on the allyship framework. So I think you certainly gave a good introduction to it there. And I apologize if I missed some of what you said. But we do have another question from John, and John is wondering if you could describe where allyship as a methodology is similar or different from participatory action research and appreciative inquiry. That sounds like an amazing question.
Yeah, it is a great question. I feel like I'm in an exam. We see it different and related to PAR. So, with participatory action research, there's always that action component, that change component. But we think that allyship doesn't necessarily have to be directly connected, or allyship and research doesn't have to be directly connected just to action research. So it can be used in lots of different contexts. So I would say that it's not necessarily separate as a methodology. But when we look at our framework, the framework that we're using, it's really about the intention and the really clear inclusion right from step one, the inception, the conception of the idea, all the way through to the completion. So with participatory action research, that's not necessarily embedded throughout the process. It certainly can be, but not all PAR research will necessarily embed all the voices and everyone as a co-researcher. Stephanie, Dorothy, Sherry, anything that you want to add? Because I'm sure people would love to hear from you instead of just me as well.
I could not have answered that question better myself, Carrie. I think just to reiterate, that big piece for us is really that intentional inclusion throughout the entirety of the process, as Carrie said, from the inception of the idea to completion, to knowledge dissemination, to analysis. Every single component with our framework very much is embedded with co-creation with folks with lived experience, to ensure that we are, being genuine and having that valid process, that validity through the process, instead of some areas where PAR can have folks included, but not throughout the entirety. That's not always the case. And so what we try to see with allyship, as Carrie said, and really I'm just reiterating because I can't say it better, is that intentional inclusion throughout. But I would love to hear Dorothy and Sherry's thoughts on that.
Yeah, what was really great about this, it was like a grassroots thing. It was touch and go all the time. It was very good to be part of participating right from the beginning, right from the questions asked to right to where the environment and everything. So we were very involved from the beginning right to the end, and seeing it through as very important for the lived experience and those that we worked with. So, and that's all we had kept in mind was who we were working with and what are we doing and how can we serve them best.
And for me, it was quite the experience. Like she said, it transpired into something we had not even anticipated in the way that it played out. I was so proud to be a part of this for the simple reason that it was the inclusion of us in every aspect. And that's the way it should be straight across the board, because we always iterate nothing about us without us. And that's where we came from with this whole project. And it can be used in any application if you follow it properly. It's all about bringing in the voices and making sure everybody knows and understands every aspect and every little piece of it. Thank you very much.
Thank you all. Thanks, Dorothy. So I'd like to extend an invitation for the audience that we have here. We have a number of people in this session. If you have questions, please pop them in the chat for our presenters. I'm sure they're just more than happy to answer any questions that you have. I think while we're waiting for those questions to come in, perhaps you can talk about one or two of the the bigger challenges that you've run up against in this work, and maybe how you went about solving those challenges. Any?
Yeah, Dorothy or Sherry, did one of you want to start with something that you guys found was a challenge? Because I'm sure we initially weren't the easiest group to work with. Maybe not. I don't know. I'll throw that over to you guys. Maybe just start.
I think the biggest challenge here is, like, especially with our with the approach that we were taking, it was more of a holistic approach where I know it just being Indigenous myself, I used the wellness wheel a lot, and that was kind of like where we based our teachings and our when we had the lived experience come and work with us, and so we could show the dignity and respect for everybody throughout. But the challenging part is trying to put that holistic approach into the tripart system of us and the mainstream and the policies that to follow within the research structure. Did you have anything to add? What's more challenging?
I'm not sure what I could say about the challenges. I just powered through everything and anything that came up and got the team really passionate about what we might be doing with this. And overall, what I found the most challenging was the idea of the oneness of us all. We're all connected, and trying to keep that connection within that allyship toolkit. And it worked perfectly. Thank you. So it wasn't really a challenge. It was a yeah.
Yeah.
I think if there's people in the audience that are doing work with the academic, I'll call it the ivory tower, I think that's where a lot of challenge can lie. So we talk about it, I think, in this presentation, but the five of us have been on or working with each other for many years, several years. So we had a baseline working relationship. I think that's what got us through some of the challenges of working with academia. So we have, you know, 3 distinct viewpoints represented, or that we had to work with as we proposed, thought through, worked through actually getting the research done. And so we had a university, a very traditional, very well-respected research university. We had a college, which is all about application and getting things done on the ground. And we had lived experience. And those 3 worlds don't speak well to each other. So there are institutional barriers that we have to figure ways around. And that's what I was most impressed with, was the patience of Dorothy and Sherry in particular, as the academic house had to kind of figure out its way to be allowed to do this work. So we often see institutional barriers put in place. Simple things like, how are we able to respectfully give honorariums to people? And we have to work through some of those challenges, because institutions, and particularly traditional research, doesn't recognize necessarily the ways that we want to respect and honor the contributions of our participants. So those are some of the challenges that you're going to get working with traditional research or post-secondary. And there was competing in every research project, or every project, even if it's not research, I think there's competing goals. And so to find a way to actually identify where those competing values are, and then to figure out what it is that we're actually prioritizing through the work. So those are some challenges that others might face as you're trying to bring this in. Even things from research ethics boards asking really, to me, upsetting questions that aren't appropriate for a research ethics board to be asking. We'll have to deal with that, because the nature of working with things like lived experience and homelessness, if people aren't grounded in that world, there's lots of questions that we had to answer on our side of the college, because that's not normally the kind of work that business professors will get engaged with. Yet that's, it's really closely tied and connected to the work that we do. I see that there is some questions in the chat again, if we want to pop over to that.
Okay.
So it's a really great question from Doreen about the practical things that made it easier for people with lived experience to participate. Thank goodness for Dorothy and Sherry. Do you guys want to talk about some of the stuff you kind of set us straight on, like right up front when we were starting to think about our design, or the things that you brought to our attention that we needed to change as we went through?
I think the first of all, what we did was, like Carrie had mentioned, we gave honorariums. And honorariums in replacement of the traditional gift cards that everybody gets thrown in their face. But this honorarium was, what it gave them when we gave them the cash was, I've had people, a girl there, for instance, she said, this is like coming to a job. And you know, it meant a lot for them. And a lot of them came back just for that fact. And she goes, I'm getting paid $15 an hour. And I says, yeah, for your knowledge. And it was just reminding them that, hey, they're the specialist. They're the journeymans, they're survivors. They've been on the streets, and some of them that were there were chronically homeless for over like 15, 20 years. I've been here since 92, and to see them participate throughout, and that little bit of dignity by giving them cash and trusting them with it, that means a lot, because a lot of people, they're going to go spend it on drugs or whatever. It doesn't matter. It's their choice, and we honored their choice throughout. And that's one thing that, and like right down from the place where we sat, where we did the workshops and did the focus groups, it was amazing because it was on their grounds, on their terms, and it was somewhere where they felt safe and comfortable. And that's something that had to be practiced throughout to get through the raw voice of them. And it was an amazing thing just to watch everything unfold with the dignity and respect for them.
And their excitement that somebody was actually listening, and this was going to go somewhere and not end up on a shelf somewhere. This is what my assurance to them was to assure them that their voice is going to make a big difference here, and their knowledge has great value. It directs us in everything that we do, and they are a big part of it. And that's honoring them right from the ground up. And that's what we did. Thank you, girls. I'm so proud of you.
And another big thing too is one thing, right down to the food that we chose, right, everything, everything you had to think about. There's a lot of people out there that have no teeth, and it's a true fact, especially with the opioid crisis and everything. And that's how, and it was just honoring from everything they consumed to what they thought was honored. And that's what I think, that's why we had them come back, and once we had the sacred circle, that sacred circle was open, that opened up so much things. The comfort, a lot, like I said, raw data, there is nothing like it. And I mean, it was amazing to see all that, and people to trust us within that sacred circle, to share our knowledge with them and them to share theirs. It was amazing.
I want to really highlight, sorry, Stephanie, do you want to, I was going to say, I want to highlight, Sherry said trust. And hands down, that was the key to getting participants in, is that Dorothy and Sherry have the trust of the community that we were trying to encourage into our initial research study that sort of sparked this whole allyship piece. So because they were an integrated part of the design, the development, the facilitation, everybody had a role, everybody's skills were utilized. But the participants could see that Dorothy and Sherry were part of the team running it. So it wasn't that Dorothy and Sherry were going and getting people and bringing them in. It's Dorothy and Sherry were talking to people, encouraging them in, getting them through the door, helping them get through the confidentiality sign-offs, making sure that people felt comfortable. And then they were there to help to pull information and clarify information and work with any of the challenges that participants would have had there. So that, I think, was one of the big key things on why we were able to get as many participants into our original study as we did. So they got them to the door, but they kept them there and brought them back the next time. So had it been myself standing there, I have absolutely zero credibility with that population. Even if I would have known half of them there, I still don't have the credibility that our co-researchers do. So I think we created trust, and they could see that we trusted and relied on each other. And I think that changed the dynamics in the room. We also used some really traditional, old school kinds of ways of connecting. We used a flip chart to take notes. So everyone can see how their voices were valued within the session. And I remember Sherry and Dorothy talking about that, how important that simple visual piece was, because they could see their words come to life on the paper. We did validation and check-in. Did I understand that right? Do I have it captured right? We would do things also like read it out, just in case somebody wasn't completely literate. And we did have some people whose second language was English, not their first. So making sure that we tried to clarify that. Stephanie, I'll throw it to you.
Thanks, Carrie. I was actually about to say the same thing, that you had, that relationship is what really allowed for some of those practical things to move forward, because participants and because community members could see the trust and relationship that had been built previously between the five of us, and that you could see that in any room. one of the pieces here that Doreen had mentioned was a specific around agendas and meeting focus. And I think because of that pre-existing relationship that we've all worked on other projects and we're seeing this kind of unfold in real time, having our co-researchers, texting each other or calling or just showing up and seeing each other to say, when should we meet again? What should we be talking about? How do we want to do this? Where is the best place? And having an open dialogue between each other and really ensuring that all of those voices were heard and taken into account with some of those practical things, such as agenda setting or honoraria and payment, or as Carrie and Sherry had mentioned, food. We originally, previous projects did the same thing that everyone does. We brought granola bars, we brought coffee, we brought fruit, apples. And I remember Dorothy coming up to me and saying, what in the world? Apples? No, we can't have apples. And so we talked about, well, what makes the most sense? And, let's do sandwiches next time, but make sure that the bread is not that crusty hard bread, that fancy bread. We need to have bread that's softer. So having that open dialogue and that trust to make mistakes and to own those mistakes and to say, you know what, that was a mistake. What should we be doing? That's really how we were able to look at those practical pieces. And it's really the first component of the framework in the allyship toolkit too, is that relationship building that leads to some of those practical pieces.
Thanks, Stephanie and Carrie, for those answers. It really brings to mind that there's so much to think about. And as you say, you're not going to get it right from the get-go, and having that trust is so important to make mistakes. There's an interesting question in the chat, I thought, in the Q&A that you might want to address, asking about sort of from the research perspective. And the question is, what appeals to you, what makes you want to focus on this topic. But I was thinking maybe you could expand even on, what was that aha moment, or what was that pain point or frustration that started you on this path? Like, so what were some of the challenges or problems or frustrations that you were seeing, observing, or experiencing yourself or among the team that made you want to pursue this topic a little bit more?
This project was a first project that we ran as a collaborative. So we're part of the Kelowna Homelessness Research Collaborative. It's a brand new, well, not brand new anymore. It was at that point a brand new group that was formed between the two public post-secondary institutions in our community in Kelowna and the Central Okanagan Journey Home Society, which is the group that is trying to become the backbone for addressing homelessness in our city. And we had done a series of sort of public consultations where we invited people in to say, what's the data that you're missing? Because one of the things that research can bring to the table is data. And we have two very different groups of researchers in our pocket. There's Kylene and I that are about, applied, get her done kind of community-based research. And then we have a group of and I hope this doesn't sound insulting, but more traditionally focused researchers that are looking at, maybe critical questions. I don't mean to be insulting because I'm joining that ranks as a PhD student right now anyway. So so it was sort of looking at what were the answers that our community needed. So myself and Kylene, Stephanie as well, are always asking, what is it that our community is needing? How are we providing value back? So not just doing research for the sake of research, but where are we adding to the knowledge that helps our community to move along where it's wanting to go in terms of homelessness? And so what we knew is that there's not enough data that's locally focused and qualitatively created. So meaning, how are the stories? We can look at literature reviews. Our research didn't turn up anything that a literature review wouldn't have turned up. So it wasn't surprising. It's not novel, but what it was grounded in our community and what that research and what gets us excited is that we're building the connections that allow us to do novel and new research. And we're also able to provide very specifically and say, yes, these are the vulnerabilities in our community. Yes, these are the solutions that our community, our people with lived experience are coming to us and saying, if you did this, this, and this would have stopped my slide towards homelessness, or it will maintain my ability to stay housed, whatever housed looks like for individuals. And that was, so it's a start of trust building. This research project in particular, but I think what gets me excited in the morning is that knowing that the work that we're doing is instantly translatable into something that somebody can use somewhere in my community. I'm hopeful it helps others, but really our goal is about, well, sorry, I shouldn't say our, I should only speak for me. My goal, anytime I step into these kinds of projects, is that there's going to be something that someone can use. I never want to put together a paper or work on a video with my colleagues here that doesn't have some use for somebody else. So we don't ever want it to sit on a shelf. What about some of the other folks? What sort of makes you guys passionate about engaging in this work? Because Dorothy and Sherry, you guys already have full, rich work lives and family lives. So what kind of gets you passionate about engaging in research?
Yeah, with I went to university too, so I've known always saw the quantitative data, the quantitative, the numbers, and that's how you get this funding, blah, blah, blah. But what I liked about this, and it got me, and it gives me hope for others, is that it's qualitative data. And that seems to be helping more and more, and it's what really got me excited was their approach that we used. And by meeting them where they're at, was so important to me throughout the process and it is kind of a process trying to get, like you said, trying to get qualitative data into the framework, right? And it was just amazing to see that. And the high risk community was just just to see them smile and just to see the quiet ones talk. That's what blew me away. Because I've seen some on the street that I've worked with for the last 5 years that all you say is hi and kind of smoke. But those were the ones that blew me away. Those were the ones that had the most to speak. And that was just valuing their thoughts, their words, and even their gestures. Because a lot of times you'll see with the homeless, and especially a lot of gestures. And we paid attention to those little things, and it meant a lot.
Oh yes, body language means a lot there. And if you're watching and seeing all of this, you have an in on that knowledge. And that knowledge, like we said, is very, very valuable. And the way that we gathered it was in a trusting, safe environment. That's what really brought it out, like Sherry said. And that knowledge, we don't hold knowledge. We share knowledge. That's what we were about. We gathered the knowledge and share it. And it happened almost in real time. Some of the knowledge that we gathered that the homeless people needed, when something happened, within 24 hours, that was applied in the community and it was settled. Everything is, the way that they mobilized all of our research and our information in that moment was incredible to see. Like we had the problem of the cold coming in, we had the problem of the heat, and the community collaboration that we created through our work was awesome to see that dynamic go into action. And when they had that shelter set up within 24 hours, they had the EPP for the COVID, they had the water for the heat. It was amazing to see all that come together, and it came together, like I said, just about in real time.
And what really got me was getting their voices out. And we honored that they're surviving the streets is a special skill. And that only they are the storytellers of that skill. And we honored that throughout. And to have them known as storytellers and knowledge keepers it's a different perspective of knowledge. Mm-hmm. And it's hard to explain. It's no academic words for that. So it is one of those challenges that we have to put in the research, right? It's having the storyteller and their voices heard. That was so important throughout. and it was echoed throughout, even right through the end, which I loved so much. And it gave us so much, I mean, I still have people to this day telling me they're excited. I have actually had the little video that I actually had to show a couple on my phone just to see where their voices went, and they were honored by that. And they like I said, they still ask us when we're coming back, and it's been a couple of years now.
Yes.
Thanks, Jerry. So there is another question in the chat, but I wondered, Stephanie, if you wanted to just quickly chime in and let us know what drives you, what makes you passionate about allyship.
Absolutely. For me, I think similar to Carrie, I grapple with the traditional, example of research, especially being a PhD student myself as well, and working in the academy, but coming from a frontline perspective. So my experience years before was deeply embedded within our community in Kelowna, with the relationships that I was building with individuals with lived experience. And as I continued to move throughout the academy, I was continuing to kind of grapple with this idea of, we can't just be doing research to be doing research. And while working so closely with Dorothy and Sherry on this particular project, and really having those light bulb moments of allyship and what that truly meant, and wanting to share that with our community, but also beyond our community, to say, this is an extension. This is something that really values the voices of folks with lived experience throughout the entire process, and that piece around not just creating outputs that are but creating outputs that are also really accessible to different people on that action side of things. So the toolkit that we have, the videos that we created, and as Sherry said, being able to show them to individuals that we've worked with, participants that were a part of projects, to just be able to whip out your phone and say, what do you think about this? And these pieces, it's the relationships and being able to continue doing the work that we're doing in a way that centers that allyship voice is what gets me really passionate and wanting to continue in this area.
Thanks, Stephanie. Apologize for my phone going in the middle of your answer. I have another question from Megan. It's regarding by name lists, and she's wondering if you would recommend this approach, using a co-creation approach with community partners and people with lived experience. I'm just wondering if you have thoughts on that. It's an interesting question.
It is, and I'll throw this back to my co-researchers here in a moment, but the one thing that I will say is yes, but. So make sure that the relationship with the individuals with lived experience is there prior to trying to implement this approach right away. So this is not fast work. If you have those relationships, Megan, already, and you're working with a few individuals with lived experience, so maybe they're part of some outreach teams already, making sure that the individuals that you're selecting to be your co-researchers are fully able to participate as co-researchers too. So making sure that they have that their world is stable enough to be able to be part of that process, or that you're allowing them to come in and out of that process as well, I think is really important. And that's some of the challenges to having co-researchers who have lived experience, including their voice for sure. But I think the risk sometimes with projects that need to happen quite quickly is that we get more consultation than we get co-creation. But if you've got the time and space to be able to sit down and say, okay, we need to do this in 3 months, or whatever your time frame is, and you've got enough of a length of time, what kinds of things, if this is our goal, our end goal, then what kinds of things can we do to make this a better process? What other voices can we include? How could we do this differently? Because I know in our community, different approaches have certainly been tried, and So including the voices of lived experience for sure, or living experience can be ways that are excellent to get that sort of that stickiness to something like a by names list, and to identify really early what your biggest barriers to getting those names will be.
I would recommend too that working in collaboration with your community partners and service providers to develop the process and really consider using the framework of allyship is that we are at a similar area in our community too. And when we were creating our framework and our allyship and research toolkit, not only did the 5 of us work on that, but we also sent it for further feedback and review to the Central Okanagan Journey Home Society. So as Carrie mentioned, that backbone organization that is addressing homelessness and that would be in this position around by name lists. And so by sending it to some of those key stakeholders, not only are we looking for their buy-in, but their understanding and their ability to see the value of using it themselves too. And so when I would recommend, you know, looking at our work for sure and considering having those conversations with your community partners and service providers that you work with too, to really ensure that there is that holistic approach to it, that you are looking at and considering everyone's voices and ability to work within this model and to truly work within the model, not in a way that applies tokenism or only consultation, but not co-creation. So really diving into those pieces a bit further. But Sherry and Dorothy, I imagine you have some thoughts on that too. You're muted there, Sherry.
Especially when it comes to the lived experience. And what I think, especially trying to keeping us going into the when choosing somebody with lived experience, I think exactly what you got to meet. It's the same with our participants. You have to meet meet us where we're at, right? And like Carrie said, you have to recognizing the challenges of your co-collaborators. Like, you know, because with lived experiences, there are challenges, whether it's our own or whether it's those that we love, right? And is recognizing those and recognizing that things change every day with the co-collaborators, like Dorothy and I, like for once, but one thing that made me stable is because she's my elder. and yeah, but that's what we fed on each other. And which we needed very much, because you're going to have triggers too, and honoring those triggers and respecting those triggers is what we did throughout. Even with the participants, and I think it wouldn't have been possible anything if we weren't there from the beginning to the end. And like I said, if you're going to choose somebody with lived experience, make sure they do have they fulfill their duties, and just explaining them throughout, right? And like I said, you might be going through it. It might be an outreach worker, it might be something, but everybody comes to the table with different ideas. It's just explaining the ideas clear from the beginning and what you want done, and just keeping the focus on the research, right? Because when you're working with lived experience, something can go this way and go that way real quick.
Yes, I totally agree with everything that everyone else has said here. Trust is a really big issue in developing that relationship with all the key players. You definitely have to have that level of trust, and also to give the participants, like the ground people, the validity that their knowledge is actually valuable. That kind of thing really brought them up. It really brought this together. That's what really brought this together, and the trust amongst our whole team. Like, we're not just co-creators, co-workers, we're sisters. And that makes the big difference. Thank you very much, my sisters.
Well said, Dorothy. Thank you so much. We're coming up to the end of the session, so I wanted to just say thank you again to you know what, did you want to have a moment to say one more thing? Go ahead.
Oh, we lost it somehow. Oh, go back here.
Did we lose Dorothy?
Wait.
Or Sherry and
Uh,
Dorothy?
Wait, I just lost the screen. Found the screen. Don't touch it, Dorothy.
No, my hand shakes and I hit things.
It happens. It happens to all of us. So I just wondered if you wanted to really quickly say something in closing to the audience. We only have 2 minutes, though.
It was an honor to be a part of everything from beginning to the end. And one of the things that really got to me was how right down that from we changed the whole format. We went from linear and we made it circular. And that in itself is a goal that you'll never see in any research like this. Instead of having the structure, we made it a holistic point of view, even right down to some of our pictures.
And the fact that things are going forward for me in that lived experience world, that homeless world, and seeing the things that we've researched and the input that we've given to all our collaborators, having that come to light and seeing that on the street, that's what really touches my heart, is definitely seeing the difference that it's making. Thank you.
I was going to say allyship too has given us a voice. This lived experience has given us a voice and is being recognized through academia. This is what allyship did for us.
Yes, and
Thank
somebody's
you.
listening. Yay.
Yeah, I put in the chat. I don't know if everyone can see the chat on the Zoom call. I've added in the link for the framework. So there you can see a short and a long video that we referenced in the presentation. So you can take a look at those if they're useful. And then there's some other reports in there. There's the toolkit that has the actual framework and explains it. And there's also on that link that I've got in the chat is the actual research that we did. So the focus group findings and some other works that were part of the larger research project. We're just trying this out. So this framework is something that's new to us. We know there are similar things in academia with community engaged research, but we do see something distinct when we're privileging the voice of lived experience within the work and making sure that that is held as a constant throughout the research. So please do connect with us. We're interested to see if other people are trying it out. Are you finding that it works? Does it not work? And maybe you too can get a group of sisters by the time that you're done your project.
Well said. So I just wanted to make a note that there were a couple of questions coming in at the end, and to the presenters, I believe you have, I believe that you're able to still answer those questions. That discussion lives on after the recording. It goes with the recording. So if there's anything there that we didn't get to for our audience, there's a chance that some of the answers will be entered a little bit later, so you can check back. So once again, I'd like to thank you all, Stephanie Lang, Carrie Rempel, Dorothy Goodeye, and Sherry Landry. Wonderful presentation. Your work is so important, and I thank you for sharing it with our audience today. I want to remind our audience about the session evaluation. You can find that under the video player beside the discussion tab on the platform. So please provide some feedback about the session. And then I'll remind you that next we have our keynote presentation by Dr. Andrew Buzari. That'll happen in about 15 minutes at 12:30 Eastern Time. Thank you all and have a wonderful conference. Bye-bye.